I'm in the Klahoose territory photographing grizzly bears in the Great Bear Rainforest. The video footage and photos were captured during my grizzly bear workshop last year. Now, since this is a workshop, I'm only going to be narrating the video and photos that I took. And I took those videos and photos so that I could edit them back at the lodge. This is part of the learning process that I like to share on my workshop, is how I capture them in the field, communicate with everyone, what my settings are, composition, so we can make decisions in real time. And then when we go back to the lodge, I can go ahead and bring it up on the computer and do some editing right there, answer some questions. I'm also going to be talking about the camera equipment that I brought into the field, some things to protect my gear in case it's really wet. There's a lot to go over, so I'm excited to get started. If you are new to this channel, my name is Shannon and I'm a full-time photographer in beautiful British Columbia. Whether you're here to learn, be inspired, or simply enjoy some stunning visuals, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos like this. So the adventure begins and I'm on a ferry. I'm on a ferry over to a little town called Powell River, where I'm going to drive up to this other little town along the ocean to meet everyone. We get everything on the boat, including our guests, and our first stop is to photograph sea lions, harbor seals, and some marine birds. Now, we usually see California sea lions and Steller sea lions. The ones here are mostly Steller sea lions. They're larger out of the two, and they growl instead of kind of bark like the California sea lions. They can be difficult to photograph because it's really about the composition, trying to make the scene a little less busy or chaotic, and if you do include a whole bunch, to try and tell a story. Now, this one guy was on his own, and I didn't take any photographs. I don't know why, but I got video. I think everyone else got this shot, and it was a winner. Now, I did see this harbor seal over here, kind of looking a little depressed. Letting the waves hit him, and I like this shot. It's kind of nice. Now, after we got our fill of photographing sea lions and harbor seals, we took off to Klahoose Wilderness Resort so that we can settle in and get some food. Klahoose Wilderness Resort is in the Klahoose First Nation's territory, and it is 100% owned by Klahoose First Nation. Many of their interpreters, guides, and staff are Klahoose and have received comprehensive training to ensure safety and comfort during our time in their territory. They are the salt of the earth, and we immediately fell in love with the people and this place. And I haven't even talked about the food and the wildlife. Like the food, I took pictures of every meal, and I'm excited to show you. So here's a less cinematic approach to my room. I'm just recording on my iPhone here, walking around, and very spacious, and check out that view. This is the main area where we bring a TV out, we do some editing, and yeah, like I said, look at that food. Every meal was just unreal. So that was it. We got some sleep after a lot of chit chat, and then the next morning we were set to go. We had an amazing breakfast, and then we got back on the boat and headed into bear country. There were a few steps along the way to get us to this point along the river. And once we were here, our nerves were high and our excitement was that much higher. As photographers, I come a long way. Everything is riding on that first day. Will you see grizzlies? When are they going to appear? What the shots are going to look like? And there was definitely fish, so plenty of food. All signs were pointing to this moment of getting the first shot. At one point, just in one tree, I counted about a dozen turkey vultures, and there was plenty of eagles flying by, so food was everywhere. And there are towers that we can view and photograph the wildlife from, but our guide allowed us to photograph at eye level at times. Kind of depends on the scenario where the bears are moving, and then there's plenty of cubs with their moms in this river as well that are feeding, and they can be a bit skittish. So Because we're a photography workshop, we got to stay there longer and to be down on the ground. Now, this bear is one of the largest that we've seen, and he's so big that he's kind of lazy. He doesn't really chase the fish too much. He looks for sort of the weaker ones and picks them off. Can't remember his name. I feel like it's like Bruno or Bruce. Now, the 5 species of Pacific salmon that spawn in the Great Bear Rainforest is the Chinook, Coho, Sockeye, Pink, and Chum. And what we see here is mostly chum that are swimming up the rivers. Chum salmon can get up to 3.5 feet long and weigh up to 45 pounds. Now this is the first cub we saw, and I love this cub. It's got such a great coat. I mean, cubs are quite playful, very curious, trying fish sometimes for the first time, and getting a knack of hunting and diving and jumping and charging. So this was a beautiful spot to try and capture some images. I unfortunately didn't get many great shots here, but I did get some beautiful looks and some slow-mo footage of this grizzly bear cub. Now this is just the first day. Be sure to stick around until the end where we see a couple of more cubs and their moms, and it was just amazing. So many great shots, so many great moments. Here's some more footage of that giant male bear. You can see his belly that's just touching the water. And of course there's salmon all around, but you know, he's just gonna look for the slow ones. Now the temperature wasn't crazy hot, which is so great because we didn't get much heat haze. We are further into the mountain valley, and that helps as well. You got the woods that's there, and of course the river, so it stays fairly cool. But what you do notice is that there is a lot of contrast, especially during the middle of the day, where you got the bright highlights of the water and the bear's fur, and then you got the really dark shadows. So usually during this time I photograph things and really chuck them over into black and white. Now, grizzly bears weren't the only cool thing that we photographed today. We also photographed this dragonfly that decided to land on one of the photographer's lens. So here it is, just chilling out. It has a meal of its own, one of the flies. And these dragonflies are very common during this time just because the amount of dead fish. So there's flies everywhere, plenty of food for the dragonflies, and we all had time to take photos. It was a few minutes where it just sat there, except for the participant where this was landed on its lens, and he was a good sport at just letting us photograph this guy really close. After watching the dragonfly enjoy his meal, we decided to get back on the boat, head back to the lodge, so we can have an incredible 5-star meal of our own. And with full bellies, we settled into the night learning about the culture of the Klahoose First Nation, and we did some photo editing and photo discussion. Now there is a wood-burning sauna. I don't think anyone used it the first night. We were all pretty tired, so we quickly went to bed and got excited for tomorrow's shoot. Now the next morning, I'm gonna let the music do the talking. This isn't Italy, but with the 5-star dining and the espresso machines, it just fit with the music. So now that we have all of our coffee and our food in us, we are ready to take some photos. Now there weren't any bears present when we first got there, so we took a walk down along the beach to look at the tracks. There's also some of the bedding where the grizzlies will kind of dig a little hole for their big belly. Here is our fabulous Klahoose guide, Ben, who's really displaying how the bear would kind of bed down and take a nap during the middle of the day. Ben really reminds me of a grizzly bear. Now to put into perspective the size of this salmon, my boot is almost a foot long, from the very back to the front. So these are really big fish. Now it was a bit of a slow day, but we did hear of a bear that was down at the first tower. So we hopped into the bus and we drove down to watch this guy snacking on another fish and walking up the riverbed. I got more photos and video to share, but I wanted to talk about my camera equipment and setup and some of my settings. So the first is this chest harness. This is by Cotton Carrier. They are not sponsoring this video. This is great for being hands-free. So I can put my gear up top and be hands-free. When you're on the boat or on the bus or walking through the woods, it's nice not to have your camera gear in your hands so that you trip and fall and destroy your camera gear. Now, normally I put, my Sony up here, and then on my side I've got this belt buckle that is the same system by Cotton Carrier. Here's one that actually fits onto your belt, and this just fits down in here, of course. And I can put it on my side. And that way my long lens is actually in line with my leg. It's easy to hold and kind of walk with my, big long lens and camera. So that's my setup for that. Now the mics that I'm using is like a directional shotgun mic. So this is from Rode. I'll have links down below if you're interested in any of this gear. And of course, it's got like a dead cat. If it's really windy, I can put this over top of the mic to reduce the sound. If it's really wet, I bring out, my microfiber cloths. But before I use this and there's a lot of water on my camera gear, I'll use just a normal face cloth, just cotton, just to soak up the majority of the water. Now, if it's really going to rain and I'm prepared, I will be bringing, rain sleeves that go over my camera. Now, you can get these on Amazon or even probably at your local photographer or camera store. And there's a couple of them that come into a pack. This one's pretty wrinkly. But again, I have links down below. If you're someone who's doing this all the time and you're going to hunker down in the field and it's just going to downpour, that's where you bring in a much larger, something that's a little bit more resistant to wind and the cold. And this is the Think Tank. It's a bit of a beast, but you can keep your hands out of the rain. And I rarely open this up unless I'm doing big trips that you're pretty much just sitting out in the rain waiting for the action to happen. So I've got a whole video on that if you're interested. Now let's talk about my settings. I shoot manual mode with auto ISO. So I set my aperture, which is typically wide open. And then my shutter speed is dependent on the wildlife and its movement. Bears are typically fairly slow, so you can probably get away with 1/800th of a second, maybe even slower. And when they're chasing after the fish, that's when you're going to want to crank it up to like 2,000ths of a shutter. So I'll just do that quickly, especially if I know the action's about to happen or it is happening. I move that and then I don't think about anything else because the ISO is just going to fill in that missing gap. It's just going to move to properly expose the image. Now, I'm shooting matrix mode, which evaluates the whole scene. This takes into consideration the dark shadows, the dark bear, and tries to balance it against the really bright water and the reflection. This is not always 100% accurate because the camera doesn't know that you're trying to properly expose the bear and the shadows without blowing out the highlights of the water. So this is where your exposure compensation comes in. Now it's a lot easier on a mirrorless camera because whatever you see through your viewfinder or the back screen, that is what your photo is going to look like when you take the photo. Whereas if you're someone who's shooting DSLR or an SLR, well, what you see through the viewfinder is just what you see with your normal eyes. That's going to be different than you taking the photo. So you have to know how your camera is going to, meter the situation. And this is where DSLRs, I might move away from matrix mode to a central evaluative setting so that I'm evaluating the bear and the water around it, but maybe not the dark shadows that are off in the woods in the background. So I might use that, but 99% of the time I just use matrix and I check my work. So take a photo, take a couple of photos, and then be reviewing your work every once in a while. For binoculars, I have the Nikon Monarch M5. These ones are really affordable for a really nice pair of binoculars. And yeah, I really like them. It's got a little strap here, again from Cotton Carrier, that I can just, mount on my chest when we're on the boats or for viewing the Grizzlies. The majority of the photos and video that I captured were done handheld. I've got this 400 lens with a 4.5 aperture, and then I've got a 1.4 teleconverter. So this gives me 560 mils of reach. And it's really light. The weight is really back at the camera. And the stability with the camera and the lens is actually really nice. So I can control my breathing. I like to hold the lens underneath. And then if I can't grab a focus on the bear and know that I've got focus on it, I will just move the focus ring, which will activate my peak highlights, and then I'll just manually focus. The bear's not moving, across football fields within a matter of seconds like birds do. Instead, this is a big bear. I can just sit there, pull focus manually. Once I get it, even if I move back and forth, the bear is probably far enough away that I'm not going to lose focus. Now, there has been times where, some grizzlies have walked up the riverbed and they've been so close that they've filled my viewfinder. During that time, they're close enough that the camera can pick up on the eye, and then I'm just holding down my continuous focus, grabbing that eye, and then just taking pictures, controlling my breathing. Now, the cameras that I'm using do have 2 slots, but I don't write to both cards for redundancy. I trust these cards that I have. I'm using sometimes a Sony card or the pro grade, like either Cobalts, or they have a newer one now. These things have never let me down. I think if it was like really, really important, like say if it was the spirit bears, that's when I might invest in having multiple cards on me to copy onto both cards. But in this case, I didn't. Instead, when I come back to the lodge, I do copy it to 2 different locations, whether it's my computer's hard drive and then another external hard drive, or I just bring 2 external hard drives and I copy to both of them. Another thing to mention is that I program some of my function buttons, like on the front of the camera here, so that I zoom in 100%. That allows me to see the grizzly, pull focus if I need to, but I can fine tune my focus. And then I can push that button again and it zooms back out that 100%. I also program my lenses buttons so that I use spot focus. So as soon as I push this and I hold it down, spot focus is shown on my screen, and then I can move it to, say, a kingfisher or a small bird that might be there on the scene that could use spot focus, especially if my camera doesn't grab focus on the wildlife. So that's basically my setup. If you have any questions, let me know down in the comments. All right, let's go back out into the field. I want to show you what is my favorite day on this trip and show you the shots that I got. So on our way back to the lodge, we stopped at this beautiful waterfall. Each day we drive by this waterfall, but today we were going to get right underneath of it. Now we were taking photographs, getting wet underneath the waterfall. What I didn't know is that you could take long exposures with your iPhone. This is the shot that I took with my iPhone. How you do this is you just go into live mode. So you click up in the top right, there's a live on, live off. And once you do a 1-second recording in live mode, you go back into that live mode and go down to long exposure. There's that little tab there. And it crops in a bit, but take a look at this. It's a long exposure photo. Now, I didn't know that you could do this. This was Joe, who was on the boat with us, and he showed me how to do it. So I learned something from him. Thank you so much. It's humbling to know that there's always something to learn from everyone who's around you. Back at the lodge, we had another unforgettable meal. This, I believe, was a 3-course meal. And look at this. There's no words. For dessert, they lit some wood on fire, kind of the smell of smoke, and we had s'mores. Everything was just so delightful. In the evening, we learned more about the culture of the Klahoose First Nation. We did some crafts. We made these roses out of cedar strips. Whether we were out on the boat looking at some pictographs and wall paintings, or back at the lodge, there was history and storytelling and music, and we were blessed to be welcomed there and to learn about this culture and to see the wildlife and the beauty that this place has to offer. So that evening we did some more editing, more cultural crafts and storytelling, and we wound down for the night because the following day was going to be the best day out photographing grizzlies. So if you can understand what I'm saying, then you're part of the club of quiet communication. Basically, I was talking about a male grizzly that was eating some salmon, but I didn't want to show any of that footage. I wanted to get right to the meat and potatoes, which is this mama bear. And she was just so lovely, kind of exploring. She knew we were there, and she wasn't alone. There was a cub with her as well. And the little bear here, you can see him smelling. He's really sniffing the air. He's looking over at us. And of course, he's a cub. He's still exploring, and now he's going up on his hind legs. I mean, so cute. And these are some fabulous opportunities to take some photos. Mama bear is just chilling. She's just off looking for food, and so it's really nice to see this interaction between the two of them, the relaxed mama bear, while there's other big males in the same river. And then humans are there as well. So this is a nice balance between photographers and tourists coming to see these grizzlies in their natural habitat. Now today is overcast, and with their fur being reflective, it's a really nice balance and dealing with the shadows and the highlights. It's kind of nice that the water isn't blown out. Like when they're moving through the water, splashing, or there's water droplets dripping off their fur, the reflective light isn't blown out in the highlights. And sometimes on cloudier days, you don't get as much color, but there's so much color already in the water. And their fur looks quite nice too. So today was a good day. Now watch here as the mood changes from color to black and white. Black and white kind of gives it a sad, sort of lonely feel, especially here with the bears looking up at me and you got those catch lights in the eyes. Which one do you guys like? Do you like kind of the moodier black and white? Or is it color all the way for you? Now we are in the Great Bear Rainforest on the southern part, which is a temperate coastal rainforest in British Columbia. It spans about 6.4 million hectares. These grizzlies are coastal bears, different from their inland relatives due to their rich diet. They inhabit this dense old-growth forest, river valleys, and estuaries moving between coastal and mountainous regions. Coastal grizzlies are larger than inland cousins due to their protein-rich diet. Males can weigh up to 1,000 pounds, which is 450 kilos, while females are smaller, around 400 to 600 pounds, 180 to 270 kilos. They can stand up to 8 feet tall on their hind legs. Grizzly bears have a muscular hump on their shoulders that helps them dig. This is one of the big differences between black bears and grizzly bears, is that hump. Their fur color varies from blonde to dark brown, sometimes with a silver grizzled appearance. Their diet is rich and diverse, including salmon, berries, sedge grass, roots, and shellfish. Salmon is crucial. It provides high-fat nutrition, helping bears bulk up before hibernation. They use their power in claws and jaws to catch and tear apart salmon, often selectively eating the fattest parts. Grizzlies act as an ecosystem engineer by dragging salmon into the forest, enriching the soil with nutrients from the ocean. The Great Bear Rainforest ecosystem relies on the salmon cycle, benefiting everything from trees to scavengers like ravens and wolves. Coastal grizzlies tend to tolerate each other more than inland bears due to abundant food. They still maintain dominance hierarchies, with the largest male getting the best fishing spots. Mothers are fiercely protective of their cubs, keeping them for 2 to 3 years before they become independent. Grizzly bears in the Great Bear Rainforest hibernate in dens between November and April. They dig dens in hillsides, tree roots, or rocky areas, often returning to the same spot each year. The Great Bear Rainforest is one of the last strongholds for grizzlies in North America. The ban on grizzly bear hunting in British Columbia in 2017 has helped protect them. Logging, climate change, and salmon declines remain major threats. Many First Nations communities play a crucial role in grizzly conservation, advocating for habitat protection. It was so fun just watching this cub sort of play with this giant salmon. And even the photos that I got look kind of comical. You know, he's moving the fish around. Here he kind of looks at him like, oh man, I'm supposed to eat you? Here it's like he hugged the fish, before he decided he's gonna tear it apart. Finally, Mama Bear and Baby Bear decided to climb the banks and head off into the woods, probably over to another part of the river. We decided to leave this location because we heard about another bear and a cub sighting. So we headed over to this other tower, and just as we got off the bus, we saw this Mama Bear grab this giant salmon out of the river. And then our last bear sighting was again the dominant male coming back out into probably the best fishing hole. You can see salmon everywhere just dancing around him, and we were really hoping for some amazing action, but he is a big bear. He's got a lot of food in his belly. Okay, check out this one salmon, and it's just barely making its way across the rocks. And then the bear's nose comes right up to the salmon, slapped its nose, almost like, come on, I'm right here. And he even takes a nip, and the salmon just scurries off. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this guy, so close. Come on, Bruno, or Bill, or Bob, whatever your name is, give us some action. After chasing a few birds and a harbor seal, we headed back to the lodge where a few relaxed, some took a kayak out for a nice paddle as we got ready to have our last evening at the lodge. I want to thank those who came out with me on this workshop last year. You guys were amazing. I would be so delighted to see you again on another photo expedition. Now, if you want to join me on a grizzly bear workshop, well, I have a few spots available at the time of this recording. Now, it usually fills up, and if that's the case, well, I'm going to have another one in 2026. There will be a link down below. You can check it out, all the details, including lodging and price. And if you have any questions, you can let me know down in the comments. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you aren't subscribed, think about subscribing. I will see you on the next episode. Thanks for watching. Ciao.